There is a distinct, melancholic scent to an emptying apartment. It smells of stripped packing tape, disturbed dust motes, and the faint, lingering ghost of dinners cooked seasons ago. When you pack up your life, you are not merely boxing up paperback novels and winter coats. You are dismantling a sanctuary. The hollow echo of your own footsteps against bare floorboards serves as a relentless reminder that a chapter is closing. But before any sanctuary can be gracefully abandoned, it must first be defended. 3 years ago, the air inside this third-floor walk-up had been thick with the suffocating humidity of late August. Cardboard boxes, heavy with the accumulated weight of my 20s, sat stacked in the center of the living room like a miniature corrugated skyline. I had been dragging a box of kitchenware toward the galley when my father, Bramwell, planted himself firmly in the doorway. He possessed the weathered, unyielding posture of a man who had spent his entire life anticipating the other shoe to drop. He had been thoroughly burned by a predatory property management firm in his youth, a financial sting he carried with him like a bad knee that ached whenever it rained. He held up a hand, halting my progress. He ordered me to drop the box and pull out my phone. According to Bramwell, unpacking a single fork before securing an ironclad digital alibi was tantamount to financial treason. I had rolled my eyes, groaning about the heat and the late hour, dismissing his paranoia as the outdated anxiety of a different generation. But Bramwell did not budge. He stood there, arms crossed over his faded denim shirt, until I sighed, unlocked my screen, and hit record. For 45 grueling minutes, I paced through the empty, echoing rooms of the apartment. I felt ridiculous. I narrated my journey out loud, my voice bouncing off the bare plaster walls as I directed the camera lens into every shadowed corner and neglected alcove. Following his strict choreography, I then went back through the unit, trading video for high-resolution photography. I crouched awkwardly to capture a deep, jagged gouge in the hallway's oak flooring, the raw wood exposed like a pale lightning bolt against the dark varnish. I stood on the edge of the porcelain bathtub, wobbling slightly, to photograph a pale yellow water stain on the bathroom ceiling that vaguely resembled the continent of Australia. I crawled on my hands and knees in the bedroom, capturing the significant dark scuff marks chewing up the white baseboards. In every single photograph, I made sure my phone's digital calendar widget was clearly visible in the frame, anchoring the damage to that exact, sweltering Tuesday. That evening, eating cold takeout atop a stack of encyclopedias, I uploaded the massive file dump to a dedicated folder on my cloud drive. To satisfy Bramwell's relentless need for redundancy, I generated a shareable link and emailed it to my own address, creating an irrefutable third-party timestamp. Then I closed the laptop, unpacked my life, and promptly forgot the folder existed. Fast forward 36 months. The apartment had been a good home, but a promotion meant I could finally afford a place with actual water pressure and windows that didn't rattle when the city buses rolled past. I had submitted my 30-day notice, packed the corrugated skyline back into existence, and scheduled the dreaded pre-move inspection. The property had changed hands 6 months prior, purchased by a boutique real estate firm managed by a man named Kalen. Kalen was infuriatingly meticulous, entirely too observant, and possessed the kind of sharp, angular features that belonged on a vintage watch advertisement. Over the past half-year, our interactions had been a series of brief, electric encounters in the lobby or tense, witty exchanges over the building's temperamental boiler. There was an undeniable friction between us, a crackling undercurrent of mutual appraisal disguised as tenant-landlord protocol. I found myself dressing a little sharper on rent-drop days, and he always seemed to linger at my door a few seconds longer than necessary when dropping off notices. When Kalen arrived for the walkthrough, the casual warmth of our previous hallway encounters was entirely absent. He stepped into the apartment wearing a tailored slate-gray jacket, his jaw set, clutching a silver clipboard like a shield. He was operating strictly in corporate mode, and the sudden chill in his demeanor stung more than I cared to admit. I leaned against the kitchen counter, crossing my arms as he began his slow, predatory circuit of the empty rooms. The silence between us was heavy, punctuated only by the sharp, metallic click of his ballpoint pen and the squeak of his leather shoes against the hardwood. He stopped in the hallway, crouching down gracefully. He ran a long, calloused finger over the pale lightning bolt carved into the oak. Rising slowly, he clicked his pen. He refused to meet my eyes, focusing instead on the top sheet of his clipboard. He spoke in a clipped, professional monotone, informing me that the deep scratch in the hallway was substantial enough to require professional sanding and refinishing. He jotted down a figure that made my jaw tighten. I didn't argue. I simply watched him, studying the rigid line of his shoulders, waiting to see how far he would take this. He moved to the bathroom, stepping inside and tilting his head back. He stared at the ceiling for a long moment before noting the water stain. He explained that water damage remediation, especially without prior maintenance requests on file from my tenancy, would have to be deducted from the security deposit. Finally, he marched into the bedroom, gesturing downward with the tip of his pen at the scuffed, battered baseboards. He categorized the wear as significant, far exceeding standard depreciation, and added another exorbitant line item to his growing tally. By the time he returned to the living room, he had essentially cannibalized my entire deposit. He finally looked up from his clipboard, his dark eyes meeting mine. There was a flicker of something in his gaze, hesitation, perhaps, or a twinge of guilt, but it was quickly masked by the impassive mask of a man doing his job. He told me he would draft the itemized deduction form at the office and send it over by the end of the week. I did not raise my voice. I did not act indignant or betrayed, even though a small part of me mourned the loss of the charming man I thought I had known. Instead, I reached into the back pocket of my jeans and pulled out my phone. I asked him to pause for just a moment. My thumb swiped across the glass screen, navigating through the digital archives of my email until I found the subject line from 3 years ago. I tapped the cloud drive link. The folder opened instantly, revealing a neatly organized grid of high-resolution thumbnails and a single, lengthy video file. I tapped play on the video and turned the screen toward him. The volume was turned all the way up. My own voice, 3 years younger and echoing slightly in the unfurnished space, filled the tense silence of the living room. On the screen, the camera panned down to the floor. "There is a deep scratch in the hallway hardwood," my recorded voice announced. "Looks like a lightning bolt." Noting this for the record. Kalen's brow furrowed. He took a half-step closer, his gaze dropping to the glowing screen in my palm. The scent of him washed over me, a clean, sharp mixture of cedarwood and black pepper. The proximity made my breath catch slightly, but I held the phone steady. I swiped out of the video and opened the photograph of the bathroom ceiling. I zoomed in on the yellow stain, panning slightly to ensure the date widget, clearly displaying a Tuesday 3 years prior, was unmistakable. I then swiped to the bedroom baseboards, showing the identical dark scuff marks already marring the white paint on day one. I looked up at him. We were standing mere inches apart now. I kept my voice perfectly level, dripping with a quiet, polite finality. I pointed out that the hallway scratch was present on day one, the ceiling stain was thoroughly documented in my opening narration, and the bedroom baseboards looked entirely identical to how they appeared at this very second. Kalen got very quiet. The corporate mask shattered completely. The rigid line of his jaw slackened, and a slow, creeping flush of color rose from his collar, dusting his cheekbones. He stared at the screen, then at the floor, and finally back at me. The realization of what had just happened washed over him. He hadn't just been proven wrong. He had been outmaneuvered with a level of precision and foresight that he clearly hadn't anticipated. He didn't offer a weak excuse. He didn't try to blame the previous ownership's shoddy record-keeping, even though we both knew that was likely the culprit. He simply swallowed hard, the sharp click of his pen sounding impossibly loud in the quiet room as he retracted the tip. He stepped back, clearing his throat, the professional distance returning to his posture, though his eyes betrayed a profound, lingering embarrassment. He stated, his voice devoid of its previous authority, that he would need to review his records. He turned on his heel and walked out of the apartment, the heavy wooden door clicking shut behind him. I stood alone in the empty living room, the silence rushing back in to fill the void. I locked my phone, a triumphant smirk tugging at the corner of my mouth, mingled with a quiet sigh of disappointment. I assumed I had secured my money, but effectively incinerated whatever delicate, unspoken connection had been brewing between us. 11 days later, the mail arrived at my new apartment across town. Inside a crisp, unmarked envelope was a cashier's check for the exact, unblemished total of my security deposit. There were no itemized deduction forms attached. There was no official letterhead offering a corporate explanation or a hollow apology. There was just the check. But later that evening, as I was breaking down the last of my moving boxes, a sharp knock echoed through my new apartment. I opened the door to find Kalen standing in the dimly lit hallway. He was out of his corporate uniform, wearing a soft, dark sweater that made him look less like a property manager and more like the man I had traded sarcastic remarks with over the boiler. He held 2 steaming cups of coffee in his hands. He looked at me, a genuine, self-deprecating smile breaking across his face. He admitted that his predecessor's files were a disaster, but more importantly, he admitted that he had been entirely, unequivocally bested. He handed me a coffee, the warmth seeping through the cardboard sleeve, and asked if I would allow him to properly apologize over dinner, somewhere with spotless baseboards and impeccable hardwood floors. I leaned against the doorframe, taking a slow sip of the coffee, and told him I would have to check my records. We often trust that the systems designed to manage our living spaces will operate with fairness and accuracy, but the reality is that businesses prioritize their own bottom lines. Protecting yourself requires more than just good faith. It requires undeniable proof. Never underestimate the power of a timestamp, a thorough video, and the stubborn advice of a parent who has navigated the pitfalls before you. Taking that extra hour to document your reality can save you thousands of dollars, and sometimes it might just earn you the respect of someone worth keeping around. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your own renter's survival stories in the comments below.